We now move ahead with our first session of the day. And the topic of our Mumbai City Experience first session would be the new financial stack reimagining banking in the era of digital disruption. And to join and share their insights on this wonderful topic, we have Mr. Harveer Singh, Chief Business Officer, Tata Digital, Mr. Bidhan Viswas, AVP Strategic FinTech Alliance, Yes Bank, Mr. Berzin Luth, Vice President, London and Partners International. And to steer the session, we have Ms. Pallavi Madhok, Vice President, Advisory Services, South Asia, Women's World Banking. May I please request our speakers to please come upon the dais? Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our experts here. Without wasting much time on introductions, I'd request Pallavi to please take ahead with the session and what it entails for all of us here today. Thank you, Pallavi.
Thanks a lot, Richa, and thank you, FinTech Festival, for inviting me over. So I love the headline that you had of a perfect storm brewing, because that's a great segue into our conversation, which is on reimagining banking. And of course, all of us have been through banking, I think, in the past 5-10 years, when there's already been a lot of change, whether it's in the lending space, saving space, or insurance, and now increasingly even investments. So, obviously when we as a panel were also discussing, we were looking into the future, the next 5-10 years, and wondering what more is in stock for us all. And I have the three wonderful panelists here who are going to help me unravel this question today. So welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to direct the first question to you, Berzin. With your outside-in experience, what, according to you, are the top 3 trends in banking? What do you see happening in the UK and globally rest of the world? And what does this mean for the Indian banking ecosystem?
Sure. So very good morning, and thanks a lot, Pallavi, for that question. So the top 3 trends, and I'll talk more from the UK perspective, is the whole growing ecosystem out there is really sort of forcing innovation to come out through. So just to put in perspective, London alone has over 3,000 fintechs. And from a banking ecosystem, when you talk about it, there are over 250 international banks based out of London or headquartered out of London. So this naturally gives a great ecosystem to kind of innovate and kind of try new things. So the top 3 trends that I would like to highlight is, one is the digital adoption that is going on over there. Banking is getting more and more convenient over there. The demand and the amount of penetration that the UK banking ecosystem has already done over there is almost 100%. So almost 100% of anyone over the age of 15 is actually using a banking service in some shape and form over there, right? And this leads to more innovation, more integration between fintechs, techs, and the banking and the traditional banking ecosystem. The second very prominent and growing part in the UK is the focus on sustainability and ESG. So it's highly prominent out there. In fact, it's quite surprising when I was reading. London Stock Exchange has been surprisingly named as the greenest stock exchange in the world. The government over there and the local agencies are also strongly promoting and helping the banking ecosystem to support more greener projects, fund more greener ecosystems. So that's something that is very strongly coming up there. And thirdly, what I would like to highlight is more about being more hyper relevance out there. So the old traditional banking ecosystem is moving away from the carpet solutions for everyone. Now, with new age fintechs and technology that are coming out, everyone is focusing on how specifically they could target every individual customer of theirs. That's pretty much on the rise. Now, talking about the Indian ecosystem, in my point of view, what I feel, there is a lot that's also coming down from UK. So when we talk about some of the large fintechs like Revolut, Tide, Monzo, in some way or the other, they've started their presence over here in India. And as a result, what I would like to say is we've seen a growing, I would like to see, and we are, I think, on the verge of seeing a very massive growth of newer banking or open banking ecosystem over here in India. I think India would continue focusing more on digital adoption and a deeper penetration into our population, because we are yet far away from what we are planning to achieve. Yes, achieving or close to 100% as well. Yes, we have our challenges of the population size and scale of the country, but I'm sure with the newer techs coming in, we'll be able to achieve that soon.
Yeah, so assuming we achieve that, you're saying it's partnerships followed by green or sustainability, and then your last point was on banking as an
Absolutely,
ecosystem,
absolutely.
open system. Lovely,
Thank you.
thank you. So with that, I'm going to take a segue to you, Bindan. You obviously understand the Indian banking sector very well. Do you believe it's at the cusp of transformation today? Is that what you're seeing on a daily basis? And what are the key customer outcomes of this?
Yeah. So thank you very much, Pallavi, for inviting to this panel discussion. Really grateful to be part of this STEM panel. Just to add to that, whatever inputs and insights I share, it is my views. So there is nothing
Sure.
related to my current organization. Yeah, I really feel that there is a rapid, transformation in the banking system. And I believe that that is because of the DPIs that we have, right? The digital public infrastructure. I feel like we are really, lucky and fortunate that we have such a digital public infrastructure in place, and we are one of the few countries to have such an infrastructure, right? Because I believe that innovation ecosystem should be public infrastructure, public technology, and private innovation, right? For example, you cannot, we couldn't have Ola without GPS, right? So that is very important. Let me give you, few interesting statistics around DPIs. If you see, UPI has almost reached 50% of the global digital transactions, right? And that's a huge thing, and it's growing day to day, right? Account aggregator framework, that is growing 30% on month, right? And if it continues that pace, I think it is going to be the next big national system for all of us, right? Also, if you, in the last 10 years, the bank account penetration have, gone up to 81% from 17%,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I feel like all of us are being able to grow our businesses, right? Because all of these people that we are chasing are now having bank accounts, right? So I think these are few numbers which are very interesting, and it's good to have, right? But the most important thing, what I feel, someone should find out, what is the actual contribution that DPI stacks, the digital public infrastructure stack, is actually, having in the GDP growth of the country, right? What is that percentage of, contribution? I think if we can, if someone, maybe some consultancy firm can, do some research and find it out. If we, know that, there will be able to understand the real impact it is having in our lives, right?
Yeah.
Let me just quickly move to the data quality and accuracy part of it to touch on that customer outcome thing. I feel like we all know that basically data is the new oil and digitization is the way forward, right? But the bigger question should be, how and what to be done to achieve digitization, keeping in view the data quality and accuracy, right? So I feel like for organizations which are building digital products, now that the government has also brought in a DPDP bill, I think we should focus on data privacy and consent management, right? On the data privacy part, I think that it is primarily the responsibility of the data principal, basically the data owner, to protect and secure his data. And that will only happen if that person is aware about all these basic stuff, right? And here comes the government responsibility to, put in more effort towards awareness about all this data protection and risk of misuse of, their own data. So that is there. On the other side, on data management, I feel like, the data fiduciaries, basically, as per the bill, the data management companies, I feel like they should build a robust, management data consent mechanism. That should be in line with the DPDP bill. And not only that, I feel like the bigger companies that are dealing with data, they should already start working on their data, and make it compliant with the DPDP bill, even before the government comes in and gives you a deadline with the framework that, okay, by this time you have to implement this bill, right? So two things I see here. One is the opportunity for the industry from this bill. I believe that whenever there is an, regulation coming in, I feel like there is opportunity for the industry or startups especially to come up with, solutions. In this case, startups or businesses can come in and build, solutions around compliance and legal and provide it to the industry, because I feel companies would, need it in some time. The problem would be for DPDP, related to DPDP would be for bigger companies. Like if we consider, the largest UPI app in the country, they have around 350 million user base, right? So for them to refresh that entire set of data, refresh the consent for all those users, and also delete the additional data that they have with them would be a huge task, right? And it has cost attached to it, right? Huge cost. So I think for them to keep, they should keep in mind one thing is, their compliance cost should always be less than the penalty, In the bill, it is mentioned that 50 crores to 500 crores, penalty could be there. So that is one point I think this company should,
Sure.
focus. Yep.
Sure. Okay, no, thank you for that. So, lot of opportunity opening up in India thanks to DPI, but of course we have to be wary of maintaining data privacy. Over to you, Harveer. I'm especially going to refer, take on from the fact that Bindan mentioned that 70 to 80% of India already has access to banking now, thanks to a lot of the digital, thanks to a lot of infrastructure, JAM, Trinity, so on and so forth. We also know from the data that was presented that a lot of these are still underserved. They have bank account, but they're underserved. So we would imagine that there is a huge untapped segment that is still waiting to be served by fintechs, banks, NBFCs. I wanted to understand from you what your experience or what your position is on, what are these untapped segments? Are these segments out there? And who is best positioned to now serve them?
So thanks to the audience for joining this session in the morning. I know BKC can be a bit of a challenge to get to,
true.
but thanks, it's nearly full house here. So coming back to your question, Pallavi, before we get into what can be served better, let's just take a look at what is being served better.
Yeah.
So in my view, there are three broad categories where fintechs, in collaboration with the banks, have been able to make a difference. I think the first one is a no-brainer, which is the digital payments in the country. There are, n number of statistics that you can throw around UPI, but I think the biggest takeaway is that about 300, 400 million people today are very, very active users of UPI, and that's talking about a large share of population of a country as diverse, not only geographically, but also from a socio-economic perspective as India, right? So that's roughly 1/4 of the population who has access to digital payments on a fairly regular basis. So that's one. The second one, to my mind, has been the effort that both the banks, fintechs, and the regulators have put into democratize access to credit.
Yeah.
Even if you think 20, 30 years ago, credit meant you had to go to a bank, you had to, apply probably multiple forms, and then your credit being granted or not being granted was at the discretion of the bank manager or whoever was occupying that chair. Today, a lot of the people, whether you have existing credit, whether you have an existing credit history or not, you can get access to credit as low as probably 5,000 rupees to as high as whatever your eligibility is. But the base of credit eligible people has suddenly expanded. And you see this in various forms. You see it in pay later schemes, you see it in financing of consumer durables, you see this in financing of mobile phones, for example, right? So that's the second one. And I would say third, which is very heartening, is getting a wider share of population the access to capital markets. Right? So again, this has been led a lot by fintech, startups, whatever you call. So, and recent few weeks, there were a number of stories on the Demat accounts, how they have increased. I think that's heartening for the economy again, because a lot of the people of this country are now able to participate in the growth prospects of the country rather than just putting a money in a fixed deposit, which may or may not give you a high upside. So these are the three areas where I believe there has been a good share. Where we could do better as an industry is one, insurance. I think probably because of lack of access or the fact that we tend to be a fatalistic people, right? Jo hoga dekha jayega. The penetration of insurance is actually quite small. Compared to any global benchmark. So I would say that there have been innovations in terms of monthly insurance, EMI equivalents, right? Sachet insurance is 149, 99, and lots of things. But I think the fire is yet to catch and become an inferno. So this, to me, is a big bet that all of us can place on. The other one is still on the credit side, but I'll nuance it by saying the SME credit. I think that's again an untapped and an underserved segment. There have been some initiatives that the players on the payment side have made by looking at the merchants, trying to get their payment, their transaction histories and giving them some credit. But again, that's an area which is ripe for disruption. So those are two areas that I see being very, very attractive from a growth perspective.
No, thanks a lot, and I'm so happy you brought up insurance because many people ignore poor little insurance from mainstream banking. No, thank you for that. I still wanted to, if I can ask you, who is best poised to tap this? Because there are a lot of players out there, and some of them are extremely experienced in, already serving Bharat, or so. Who do you think is well poised to serve the segment?
This is going to be a little bit of a it depends answer, but I think there is a wide variety of segments that can be served. So you spoke about players who are focused on Bharat, right? So there are players who are out there, some sort of self-help groups who can get access to their members to this credit the insurance schemes. That's one type. The second type in my mind would be the payment players or the players which are serving the digital payments for the merchants. I think they can help democratize a large access of merchants to get access to credit. And we know that we have about 1 crore plus shopkeepers in this country. I think the third one, to my mind, would be very grassroots types of organizations, some of what you do, the work that you do, Pallavi. I think those are the people who can get access to these new players. I think it's not a question of inability in the market to create new products. I think products can be created. The sort of the hurdle for us to cross is the fact that the consumers are either not aware or not able to get onto these products.
Correct.
I think whosoever can help build that ramp for the customers to come in and get attached to the product one time, get that sampling going, I think those will be the people who will unlock this market for us.
I so agree with you, especially with the innovations like conversational payments in your own space of payments. It's such a beautiful product. I don't know if any of you want to add to that from your experience, because this is an important question. But otherwise, yeah, feel free.
I would like to get here probably on AI. I think we can utilize that thing.
Yeah.
So see, these days AI has become the hot topic for everyone, right? Everyone just talks about AI models and everything. But what I also feel is that when we build AI models, we should focus on building ethical AI models as well. Obviously it comes down to the insurance sector as well. Yeah, right. So why I feel that is because see. These days, at an industry level, everyone is using historic data sets, right, to train their AI models, right? Now, imagine that historic data set, if it is having some form of bias or discrimination in it, it will definitely result into that model giving biased decision also, right? If I am taking a loan product. So what we should ideally do is basically we should sanitize the data and put it in a structured format, right? Now, for example, if we have a group of population, which is not accurately represented in that data set, right? Obviously, they would get a low score from that data model, right? So two things are happening here, basically. On the business side, the company that is running the model, they're unknowingly, rejecting a good set of customers, right? On the other side, the customers who are getting rejected, they don't even know that they're getting rejected based on, inaccurate representation of their data or bias in that data, right?
Bias.
Yeah. So I think we need intervention here. We need, by intervention I mean regulation here on responsible AI governance at an industry level. If you look at other countries like US, Singapore, they already have it in place, right? Also, Bank of England is doing some work on the AI piece, on the regulation bit. So I think it's high time, it's the need of the hour that we should also have it in place, yeah.
Thank you for that. Berzin, I wanted to direct the next question to you, and it's related a little bit to what you spoke in the beginning, banking as a service. So what is banking as a service? And, just demystify this. And does it mean that banks will stop existing, all, the traditional banks that all of us have banked with? And I have a follow-on question with that, but first, if you can just demystify this.
Sure. So I think I'm sure most of y'all are aware about banking as a service, quite a trending conversation. But I think if you want to break it down in the simplest shape and form, traditionally banking is a very small circle, regulated, license-driven. Getting in and performing like one of them is a long-term run. And as a result of all of this, I think these organizations are also quite slow in transformation. They have a lot of hurdles which are quite difficult. So I think with the whole banking as a service, the simplest explanation is how non-regulated or licensed tech companies who are not within the regulatory frames could also sell banking solutions. So there could be tech companies, there could be fintechs that are helping banks to sell their products and their services, helping them move a lot more quicker and faster, giving them a wider and a stronger reach as well. Now, talking about from my experience, UK has been kind of leading quite strongly on this. So the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulatory authority based in the UK, is really open and embracing this ecosystem quite strongly. Because even from from the core business and the core work that we do, we help basically Indian companies set up their business in the UK, in London specifically. One of the biggest challenge was for them to have a bank account. They could be the best companies having best of the services, but getting a bank account with a high street bank was a nightmare. That has changed in the last few years because there are so many open banking solutions, so many fintechs that are coming up with a solution. To a point, someone just offered a bank account to a company in less than 24 hours, which is phenomenal because that gives you the leverage. So I think in the UK as well, the traditional banks are rather taking advantage of this situation, partnering with a lot of these tech and fintechs to kind of grow their presence over there. And things are looking really big. So some of the open banking companies that I've already mentioned, Revolut, Monzo, they're doing phenomenal. Even around RegTech, InsurTech, there are a lot of companies that are collaborating with these larger banks and they're doing it on their behalf. And I think it's a win-win situation. And looking from a customer point of view, I think things have just, banking over there is already very convenient. It's got even more convenient over there. Because some of these traditional banks are also tying up with e-commerce, social media platforms. So things are now so easy and so convenient that it's getting more and more competitive for companies to kind of choose from what they really want. And coming to your point, would banks be in existence? I strongly feel very much yes. There is a very strong trust factor that still exists even in the UK. Fintechs are great. They give you the agility, they give you the speed, they give you the flexibility of dealing with multiple things. But with the backing of a bank is something that is still an anchor in this ecosystem. So I strongly feel banks will exist, probably in a different shape and form in some way or the other, but they'll pretty much still be the core and the anchor for this ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, and I'm just going to ask you a follow-on question. Or maybe I actually want to open it out to all three of the panelists here about taking the India context, now applying what Berzin said to the India context, because our customer base is a little different. Do we still, will banks as they are currently operating still be relevant? Do we need banking as a service solutions, or rather are banking as a service solutions relevant for a larger part of India, given that we know that a large percentage of the customers are going to branches, going to BC points, and of course there's this whole trust factor, right? Like you've banked with your State Bank of India and you trust them, and now who are this new set of companies, never heard of them, can't pronounce them. So, what does this mean for the larger, using UK for the Indian context, or is it something else that we need in India? But whoever wants to start first.
See, the Indian experience is similar to what Berzin mentioned about the UK. I think in India, the penetration of a vanilla bank account is pretty much there. We have more than 10 years of work which went under JAM Trinity. You mentioned that, right? So with Aadhaar, I think account opening became easy, zero balance account, so on and so forth. So vanilla banking is probably saturated and well served. I think where the neobanks or banking as a service can take lead is when you have purpose-specific offerings. So, banking for business. Helping businesses be not just do fund transfers, but also be compliant with all the direct and indirect taxes, being able to run a payroll, being able to run vendor payments. So there are organizations, we all know their names, who have been able to package this as an offering where banking is the core, but then you have a lot of value-added services which make a direct impact on that business's bottom line or operational efficiency. Then you have other offerings which are again very narrow from a consumer segment perspective, but very powerful. So you'll find, travel cards, cross-border accounts for people who are maybe students, who are trading or have a specific need for a cross-border. So until the point that we as an ecosystem, fintechs plus the banks are able to identify these niches and able to build a product which serves those niche areas, I think banking as a service will continue. I fully agree with what Buzzin mentioned, that the banks are not going to go away.
Yeah.
We as consumer want the best of both worlds. We want the trust of a bank, but we want the agility and the flexibility and the quality of CX that a startup might be able to provide.
Correct,
Right?
correct.
So to that extent, these will continue to
Mutually
coexist.
coexist. Yeah. No, thank you for that. Binay?
Yeah, I think on that question of whether banks would be relevant 10 years or 20 years down the line, I think definitely banks would be relevant because maybe in some different form and shape, maybe new bank or maybe every bank have their own, new banks or digital banking, unit. But banks would definitely be relevant because we need to park our money somewhere, right? So we need banks. So that is there. But one very interesting trend I'm seeing in the industry is that everybody, whether it's a fintech, a bank, everybody is trying to build, digital STP journeys, straight through process, end-to-end digital journeys for everyone, right? But as rightly mentioned by Harbir, I think the digital journeys that you make for different products, right, it should be purpose-driven. It should be depending on the purpose, right? For example, if you're building a working capital loan product for a street vendor, I think in that case, you can make it an STP journey, a straight-through process journey, digital journey. But it's better to have an assistant on the ground, an agent on the ground, just to help that person on board on that platform, right? And I also feel it is, for, the purpose of having that agent on ground is not only about onboarding that customer or that borrower, but it is also about educating that person, and getting him into the next cycle of, the credit, basically starting with a small loan and then 50 and then 1 lakh. Basically you are indirectly educating that person, that customer, and you are empowering him to, do more business, right? So our goal should be, while we build products, digital products, our goal should be to, bring that customer from zero to till capital market. We should empower them, educate them, and bring them to the capital market. I think then we'll be successful in, real sense. So that is one thing. Also, one more thing I would like to add here.
Please add.
Yeah, I feel 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line, I think one thing that should, there would be some change is on the regulatory, the way, we have the announcements from the regulator. I'm 1000% sure that the working committee in the regulator, they're doing their due diligence, before coming up with any policy or any regulation. But what I also feel is that, announcements from the regulator should not be a, surprise to the industry. Like we have recently saw that there was an announcement on risk weightage, right? So they have increased the risk weightage by 25% for unsecured lending. And I feel it was a sudden news for the industry also, right? For example, we have this bigger, one of the largest fintech in India, they had to lay off around 1,000 people from their consumer lending platform, right? Because, the lender which were lending earlier to that platform, basically they have become conservative, a bit conservative, post this policy came in place. So I think ideally it should be a both way thing, right? It should be, so the regulator, if they foresee any risk coming in the industry, they can come up and tell the industry, okay, these are the risks that we anticipate coming in, okay? So in response, probably the industry players can, give risk mitigation ways, suggestions to the regulator, and then regulator can probably come back with the policy. I think we will solve two things here. Basically, we will, solve the risk. Basically, we'll have the risk mitigation, and we'll solve those things easily, because it is already suggested by the industry only. And on the other side, businesses will still continue to grow, right? So the point here is the announcements should not be a surprise to the industry, and it should never hamper the business growth. That is the point here. And on trust, one line just to add, So people talk about trust on product a lot, right? But I feel it is not about brands or reputation or company name, or trust is not about people. I feel like it is about the product, the tech capability that the product has. I think it is a tooling issue, right? For example, UPI in 2016 had only 1 million transactions, right? Now it has crossed 10 billion transactions, right? 1,000 crore transactions it has crossed. Why? Because that UPI product has tech capability in it. That's why people has got their trust into it. So over the time, it just scaled up, right? So if you want to build a product and have trust of the customer on your product, so you should focus on building a product which has tech capability, right? I think that should be the focus when we, go ahead building digital.
No, thank you for that. So strong tech collaboration with the regulator, and of course the phygital part, which I loved, because many fintechs here imagine that no, I mean they would want to go digital only, but maybe they can only reach some amount of scale, and after that it has to be something more, or hopefully partnerships. So with that, I think we're going to now throw the floor open to questions from the audience. There's a lot of knowledge here, so feel free to ask questions. Richard, do they have a mic? Or yeah, they all have a mic. Any questions? I know coming up with the first question is the first person has to be the most courageous one. So, and then after that, it happens. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you for being the first one.
नमस्कार.
Namaste.
May I speak in Hindi?
Yes, please.
Sure. Actually, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि जैसे जो डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म ग्रो कर रहे हैं, सो फाइनेंशियल फ्रॉड्स भी इंक्रीज हो रहे हैं. सो मतलब हाउ वी कैन टैकल विद दिस फाइनेंशियल फ्रॉड्स इन डिजिटल फ्रॉड्स. Mostly, I want to point out the Aadhaar-enabled payment system. हम लोग डेली न्यूज़ में देख रहे हैं कि बायोमेट्रिक स्कैन और क्लोनिंग हो रही है और आधार से फ्रॉड्स हो रहे हैं, क्योंकि जो रिमोट एरियाज़ में एज शरद मेंशन कि BC बैंकिंग्स आर इन अराउंड द इंडिया. सो इसमें जो स्मॉल अकाउंट्स हैं ना, उनके जो फ्रॉड्स हैं वो बायोमेट्रिक से ज़्यादा हो रहे हैं, क्योंकि उनके हार्ड अर्निंग जो मनी है वो thieves are stealing.
Sure. I think I'll give a very non-technical answer to that. In simple words, I think there needs to be a lot of emphasis around financial literacy in this country, making people aware of how things work. कैसे हर चीज़ काम कर सकती है, कैसे बैंक आ सकता है. Obviously, there has to be a very strong combination of how the regulators also interact with the financial services, and there has to be a small, well-knit circle over here. And somewhere I also feel that it's great to learn from others' experiences. India is just round the corner or on the corner. There are internationally, there are a lot of countries that have experimented, done that. I think it's also a great opportunity for us to learn. Not necessarily their problems are similar to ours, but there's a lot for us to learn and develop. And I think this room itself has more than enough innovative people to come up with the ideas. And I think events and organizations like these can really help prevent all of these. These things will obviously be a part of it in some way or the other, unfortunately. But I think a proper combination of risk mitigation regulations would surely help this to be reduced to the bottom. But
Yeah, Bindu, you want to-
Just to add to this, I feel three things we can do for frauds रोकने के लिए जो भी कर सकते हैं हम लोग. First thing, if I'm a customer और मेरे साथ fraud हो रहा है, तो I should be aware कि ये सारी चीज़ें हो सकता है, right? तो that literacy part, financial literacy, right? So I think the government should come forward and put some effort to मतलब मैकेनिज्म एक होना चाहिए, कुछ एक फ्रेमवर्क होना चाहिए कि भाई ये होना चाहिए फ्रेमवर्क जिससे लोगों को, तो सिटीजन ऑफ दिस कंट्री शुड नो कि ऐसे ऐसे फ्रॉड हो सकते हैं, बेसिक, राइट? और मुझे लगता है गैप कहाँ पे है, द गवर्नमेंट शुड रियली पुट सम टेक्नोक्रेट्स इनटू दिस. ऐसा नहीं कि एक पॉलिसी निकाल दिया, कुछ एड्स निकाल दिए, राइट? उससे नहीं होगा. तो लोग तभी समझ, एक्सपर्ट्स को बिठाना चाहिए यहाँ पे, टेक्नोक्रेट्स लाइक द बिगर पीपल, राइट? दे शुड डू इट हाउ, राइट? सो दैट इज द फर्स्ट थिंग ऑन फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी. On the second thing, I feel like government as well as each organization, they have their own set of risk people, right? AML, anti-money laundering, risk, all these people they have, right? I think those people should, their understanding should be way ahead of these scamsters, these fraudsters, right? जो fraudsters कर रहे हैं, तो उनका अंडरस्टैंडिंग से जो कंपनी में जो लोग हैं स्पेसिफिक टू सॉल्व दैट प्रॉब्लम, उनका अंडरस्टैंडिंग ज़्यादा होना चाहिए. तो वो कैसे होगा? ईच ऑफ दिस कंपनी शुड फोकस ऑन ट्रेनिंग दिस पीपल. जो एडवांस लेवल पे जो हो रहा है ना आजकल, तो वो कंपनीज को फोकस करना चाहिए कि मेरे जो ये स्पेसिफिक टीम है इसका कंटिन्यूस ट्रेडिंग होता रहे, जो भी लेटेस्ट आ रहा है ना स्कैम्स. ये हो गया सेकेंड चीज़. और थर्ड इज आई थिंक वी शुड एडॉप्ट ए सिस्टम टेक लेवल पे, टेक्नोलॉजी लेवल पे एक ऐसा सिस्टम होना चाहिए जिसपे ऑलमोस्ट ये मिटिगेट हो जाता है, ये सारे स्कैम्स हो ही नहीं पाएंगे. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वी कैन अडॉप्ट प्रॉब्ली ब्लॉकचेन फॉर दैट थिंग, राइट? ब्लॉकचेन वी कैन अडॉप्ट, राइट? उसमें ये सारे करना बहुत डिफिकल्ट है, ऐसे स्कैम्स करना, राइट? सो गवर्नमेंट शुड थिंक कि ब्लॉकचेन को अडॉप्ट करे ना करे. तो आई थिंक दीज आर द थ्री थिंग्स वी शुड फोकस ऑन, यू नो, when you talk about scams and everything.
I'd like to add one more, if I may. I completely agree on the tech points, since this is mostly a tech forum. But I think responsible finance, जो आप बता रहे थे ना, it's also a responsibility of banks and NBFCs. कि आप बस कस्टमर को ऑनबोर्ड ही मत कीजिएगा. ऑनबोर्डिंग के टाइम पे भी आपको उनको लिटरेट करना बहुत ज़रूरी है. इट्स नेसेसरी पार्ट ऑफ सेल्स. वो बहुत बार मिस हो जाता है फ्रॉम बैंकिंग साइड. और ओरिजिनली ऑल ऑफ यू वुड रिमेंबर BCSBI on how you serve your customers. So now you have to add the fraud angle into all these on a daily basis. जब आप कुछ भी प्रोडक्ट सेल करते हो, टेक इंश्योरेंस, मोस्ट कॉम्प्लिकेटेड प्रोडक्ट, हाउ डू प्रिवेंट एन इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड एट द आउटसेट? आप इंश्योरेंस बेच दो, एजेंट बेच देगा, और फिर उसके बाद वो कुछ समझाता नहीं है कस्टमर को, और तभी तो फ्रॉड आते हैं. तो एट द टाइम ऑफ ऑन बोर्डिंग. बट ओपन टू मोर क्वेश्चंस, प्लीज द जेंटलमैन.
एक्चुअली मैं इसमें ऐड करना चाहूँगा. डिजिटल इंडिया हुआ, बट सिक्योर डिजिटल इंडिया अभी तक कुछ हुआ नहीं, जैसे कि हमने सभी ने देखा. तो बहुत सारे बैंक्स और जो भी एप्लीकेशंस वो आए, उनका क्वेश्चन यही था कि अब तक 2 लाख से ज़्यादा केसेस पेंडिंग है cybercrime.gov.in के ऊपर, जिनको 1% से भी कम चांसेस है उनको सॉल्व किया गया. और अब तक अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 85,000 करोड़ अब तक लूटा जा चुका है जो जमतारा में है. और वहाँ पे ऐसे चीज़ें हैं कि आपने नाइजीरिया देखा तो नाइजीरियन लोगों को भी उन्होंने लूटा है. तो ये चीज़ को मैं ये ऐड करना चाहूँगा, जैसे सर ने बोला कि ऐसे जो प्रोसेसेस है वो गवर्नमेंट ऐड करना चाहते. तो गवर्नमेंट ने ऑलरेडी cybercrime.gov.in प्रोसेस ऐड ही हुआ, बट उसको प्राइवेट पार्टनर से कुछ सपोर्ट मिलना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये 2-वे हैंडशेक होना चाहिए, ना कि गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से गवर्नमेंट बोल रहा है कि आप UPI के ऊपर ये मत करो, बट वो लोगों को साइबर अवेयरनेस जो कैंपेन है वो एक्चुअली करना चाहिए. तो बेसिकली हमने मैं शॉर्ट में बता रहा हूँ कि cyber.ambassador.co.in हमने सिंगल सर के साथ नासिक में ये स्टार्ट किया था. बट बेसिकली प्राइवेट पार्टनर जो है वो उनकी तरफ जाना चाहिए, और ज़्यादातर अपनी कंपनीज के लोगों को या स्टूडेंट्स को ये अगर बताया जा सके, जैसे फिनेंस लिटरेसी है, तो सेम एज साइबर अवेयरनेस कैंपेन, एक को दूसरे को, दूसरे से तीसरे को, ऐसे बहुत सारे ब्रोशर निकले, बट वो एडवर्टाइजमेंट तक ही रहे. अपनी जो भी कंपनीज है वो इस प्रोसेस को कैसे आगे लेंगे.
थैंक यू फॉर योर कमेंट. डू यू हैव अ क्वेश्चन? ओनली कमेंट?
यस यस, नहीं, उनको सिर्फ ऐड करना था. थैंक यू.
Yes, if any questions? Yes, the gentleman in the pink shirt, yes.
Hi, Naveen here. It's very evident that there are two aspects to it. One is the technical or technological fraud, and the other one is operational fraud. I think what we are talking about in general is the operational fraud and not the technology or technical fraud per se. What I would like to understand is what are the steps that are taken by, say, Tata Digital and other organizations. How do you mitigate these operational frauds? Because technically we know that there is almost zero fraud. Because it's very difficult to non-repudiate. But operationally, yeah, there are a whole lot of frauds as we are hearing and seeing in 2 lakh cases. But these are process-driven frauds, not technology-based frauds. So what are the steps taken by, in terms of communication or in terms of other steps for reducing operational frauds?
So, based on my sort of experience in the industry, see, there are two aspects. One is the process governance has to be very, very strong at various levels. It has to be strong at the bank level, whosoever is your bank. If you take bank account as an example, it has to be strong at the agents, the downstream agents that the bank appoints, maybe a BC, maybe somebody else, right? And at the regulatory level also. I think there is another aspect that we often forget, which is what is the actual liability of the customer. So as long as we have zero liability rules in place for protecting the customer, you have a great incentive which gets generated for the other players in the market, maybe a bank, maybe somebody else, in order to improve their processes automatically. Because they know that if customer is not at fault, then any loss that the end customer faces has to be made good by somebody in the chain. I think the other thing that we sort of often forget in this whole, attractiveness of fraud, and maybe, TV series have also played their part, is the work that the regulator has been doing. If you trace the evolution of ombudsman on the digital side over the last 6-7 years, until recently, RBI used to have 3 ombudsmen. Now they have integrated everything into the integrated ombudsman scheme, or IOS as they call it, right? So there, it does not matter what fraud has happened, where it has happened, with whom it has happened. As long as you are a customer who has experienced fraud, you could just go ahead and lodge your complaint. So there are multiple initiatives which are being taken both by the regulator and the system participants to reduce this, but also there is a stronger need for a regulatory angle. Like, all of us in this room probably are more of a credit card segment, if I can call it, right? In credit card, as long as you report a fraud, it's not on you. You as a consumer are protected. We need that kind of rules to be applicable to even a savings bank or some BC type of a fraud. That is when the overall confidence of the customers in the system would increase. I would say that, to me, that is the real trust. We speak about, and Bidhan spoke about how, 300, 400 million customers are using UPI, and we have more than 10 billion transactions, whereas it was, in single millions until about 4 or 5 years ago, because people know that, one, the stability is very high for this kind of a payment system, just taking UPI as an example. And two, God forbid if something goes wrong, you get your money back. So those are the kind of direction that we need to move in. UPI has set a great example in that direction, and it can be emulated by other products.
Okay, I think with that, we are good to close, unless we are good to close the session. Thank you. I'll just conclude. We are hoping that banking in the future in India will be inclusive, democratic, fair, customer-centric, hyper-personalized, and trustworthy and safe. And I hope you keep a session dedicated to fraud also in the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, for such an insightful discussion. May I please request you to please come forward for a group picture? Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together once again for our experts here. Pallavi represents Women's World Banking, and Women's World Banking is our gender partner for FinTech Festival 2024. They have been very active in bringing gender parity and discussions to main stage. They also walk the talk in terms of financial literacy and also helping the rural, unserved, and unbanked sector. So over the course of the entire day, please feel free to meet and network with Pallavi.